Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another video. So in this video, we're going to talk about Speedlight basics. So if you are a beginner when it comes to Flash and you're just kind of lost with just understanding your Speedlight and all the different menu settings on it, this video can definitely help you out. So stay tuned. All right, fam, you already know how to do it. We're going to hop straight into it. I do not want to waste your time. So like I said, this video is going to be very basic. I'm going to try to dumb stuff down just to make it easy to understand, because a lot of this stuff I remember, when I first started using the Flash and trying to understand this menu, I was freaking confused. It took me a while to really understand this stuff. So I'm not going to be technical. All right, so the first thing I'm going to be touching on is just the different modes on your Flash. This is very important and you need to know this stuff. In the first mode I want to talk about is manual mode. And when it comes to manual mode, you can pretty much change the power output of your Flash manually. So I like that you have full control over this, and you'll see with some of the other settings, it's the opposite. So I personally, since I've been using Flash, this is what I started with. I did a lot of research. I kept seeing a lot of people say you need to really understand manual mode, and to me that was the equivalent of, when I first got started with using the camera, I really seen photographers push, you need to understand manual mode. And I like having that control with manual mode. I'm not just, dependent on my gear to figure out the settings, because if you've been doing photography for a while, you know that you can't always just depend on the auto settings of your camera. And I feel the same way about the Flash when it comes to Flash. So I prefer manual mode. I use that, I'd say 100% of the time. So all right, so the second mode is TTL. All right, so in simple terms, TTL is like the auto settings for your camera. So with this setting, you don't have control of the power output of your Flash. Your Flash and your camera are going to determine the output. And it may just be your camera that determines that output, but they're going to determine the output based on that specific scene. And I'm not saying that you have to do manual mode just because I do it, because I've seen a lot of photographers say they prefer TTL, and I can see in certain situations why TTL is a good option to use. For example, let's say if you're a event photographer, wedding photographer, and you're not just trying to change your settings all the time because you have a lot of stuff going on, I could see why you would just rely on TTL and have the Flash just kind of figure out the settings so you don't have to worry about them. In the end, it really just comes down to what you prefer, but I do suggest just trying these different settings. You have to try them out in real situations and see just what works best for you and what you like to use better. All right, so mode number 3 is multi-mode. Now, I'll be 100% honest with you. I've never used multi-mode, and I don't really know what it's for, which is probably, I was just really confused by it. I've never really seen people talk about it, so I haven't really used it, but I pulled it up on the screen and I'm gonna let y'all know just what it is, just in case you just wanna know, or maybe you're thinking about using it. And right here, like I said, I'm gonna read this to y'all. It says you can set how many times it will fire and what time interval those flashes will go off. With multi-mode, you can uniquely capture movement in one exposure. All right, so moving on to the second point that I want to talk about, and that is flash power. So flash power is pretty simple to understand. You'll see numbers on your Flash like 11, 12, 56, 116, 132. So this is your flash power. So the lower that number, the more flash power you have. So full power would be 11, and the higher that number on the back end, so let's say 1256, that's the least amount of flash power that you can use. Now, something very important to know and to keep in mind with your flash power is this can affect your recycle time. So that's the recycle time between your flashes. So if you're shooting at a very high power, let's say you're shooting at full power, your recycle time for the Flash is going to be slower, right? So the least amount of power you use, you're going to have a pretty quick recycle time. And this is very important to know, because I remember when I really didn't understand Flash completely, I remember being in a situation where I didn't understand why my Flash wasn't popping off, and it's because my power was too high and it was taking longer to recycle. So that is important to know. And if I'm using the Speedlight, I usually keep my power around, for the most part, 132 or 116. I really don't go lower than like 116, maybe 1.8, but not very often if I'm shooting an event. I don't try to just really use a whole bunch of flash power to keep that good recycle time and to not wear out my battery really fast. I'm just usually just using that to add more light into the scene. So it's just adding light on top of my settings. So I really try to dial in my settings and then just add, you know, the necessary light that I need to get the proper exposure. All right, so the next point I want to touch on is flash zoom. Now, when I first started, I remember being very confused about this also. I just had no idea what that was. I was like, what the heck is this zoom stuff, right? So first off, some flashes do not have this zoom option, so you won't see this on every single flash. What the flash zoom refers to is the spread of the light, pretty much. Now, something I've noticed, if you have a zoom lens, then the zoom, well, at least for my flashes, it will automatically change when you change the focal length on your zoom lens. So if I go from 25 millimeters to 55, then I'll see my zoom automatically change on my flash. Now, when it comes to prime lenses, I just pretty much change this to my focal length. So if I'm using a 35, then I will change my zoom to 35, or if I'm using like an 85, I'll change that to 85. All right, so moving on, the next thing I want to talk about is channels and groups. So when it comes to channels, you'll see on your flash, it'll have in the corner, it'll be like channel 1, and you could change that to channel 1, channel 2, channel 3. This is pretty much like with the dealing with the communication between your flash and triggers. So for your flash to work, you want to have them on the same channel. So if my trigger is on channel 1, I have the flash on channel 1. So if I have my trigger on, let's say, channel 2, and I have my flash on channel 3, then it's not going to fire because it's not on the same channel. And this is also good to know if, let's say, you're in a situation where it's multiple photographers that are using flash photography. So a good example would be weddings, right? You know, sometimes it's 2 photographers. So let's say y'all are both using flashes. Y'all may not want to be on the same channel, triggering each other's flashes. So what you could do is one photographer could switch to channel 2. So you have one on channel 1, one on channel 2, operating their own flashes on a different channel. All right, so let's talk about groups. So the groups are pretty much where you'll see A, B, C, and D on your flash. So with these groups, you can assign different flashes to each group. So sometimes I'll use multiple flashes. So I may have one flash on group A, I'll have like a rim light on group B, and then on group C, I may have another additional light. So in simple terms, with these groups, you're just assigning different flashes to each group. All right, and the last point I want to talk about is the bounce card. So if you have a flash, you will see that most of them have a bounce card. The Godox V1 doesn't have one, but it's usually on the top. You can pull it out and it's just a little white square that sits on the top of the flash head. Now the bounce card is pretty much what the name says, bounce card. So it's bouncing light. It's just a way to bounce light. This isn't something that I use a lot. It's something that I use and my wife also used when we first started photography and didn't know too much about modifiers and things like that. So let's say you're at a wedding reception and you need to use flash and you need to bounce light. Let's say you can't bounce light off the walls because the walls are freaking red or something like that. You could use your bounce card, just use your bounce card, have your flash pointed straight up, and that could be a way that you could bounce light. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're using flash. If you're using a speedlight, don't point the speedlight straight at them. You don't want to blind people. So you could easily just raise the speedlight up, pull out your bounce card if you want to bounce it out the bounce card, and just use your flash that way. Now, something to keep in mind is the bounce card is a very small surface. So to diffuse that light, let's say, for example, a wedding reception, it would be better if you diffuse it off a big surface. That's why you see people bouncing off of walls. It's a really big surface and it produces a really nice soft light. So just something to keep in mind with the bounce card. It's a very small surface, so you're not going to get that same effect versus if you bounced off a big wall or you used a really big modifier. So that is my breakdown of just speedlight basics and just kind of getting to know your speedlight. I tried to explain that in the simplest way possible. I know this can get really confusing, but if you want to learn more about flash photography, I have a series on my channel where I cover everything about flash photography, what speedlights, what strobes you should use, high speed sync, off camera flash. So if you want to learn about that stuff, definitely check out that series. It'll be linked in the card up top and in the description down below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop it a like, subscribe to the channel. I post new videos every single week. I will see y'all in my next video. Peace.